Hear ye, hear ye, know your city, know your city.
Hello, boys and girls. It's time once again to know your city. Today we shall visit the museums of New York, and your quizmaster, Aunt Edith, has lots of good questions on the topic, the museums of New York. And now here she is, Aunt Edith.
Thank you, Paul. And hello, boys and girls. I hope you're all ready for that museum trip around New York. Our guests for today are from PS1 Richmond, PS19 Manhattan, and from PS94 the Bronx. Now, from PS1 in Richmond, we have
Diana Resnick,
Edward Harrison,
and Barry Corson.
And from PS19 in Manhattan, we have
Marcia Weinkrantz, Alan Rodney, and Stephen Levy.
And from PS94 the Bronx, we have
Lawrence Diamond and Lois Teichman.
And our alternates in the studio are Donald Wilson, George Harper, Joy Reed, Susan Rudnick, Susan Kramer, Ralph Greco, Marilyn Mandelbaum, Wesley Knight, and Peter Wasserman. Our scorekeepers are Florence Weidler, Ruth Winthrop, and Mrs. Pearl Gross. Now, we're very pleased to have Marcia's father with us today, not only because he helped us to get on our program today, on the air today, but also because Mr. Herman Weinkrantz is also in the office of the borough president, Robert F. Wagner, Jr., where, as you know, the City History Club has its headquarters. And incidentally, Marcia is going to be 8 years old tomorrow, and so we're doubly happy to have her here. Now, a little later in our program, we are going to hear from a representative of Class 4-3 of PS9 Brooklyn, so that really 4 of our boroughs will be represented on Know Your City today. Now, because the weather is getting nicer, the boys and girls of PS1 Richmond have prepared a report for our listeners to tell them about places they might like to visit on their beautiful little island. Would you like to read us that report, Diana?
Staten Island is the 3rd largest borough on New York City. It is more than 2 1/2 the times size of Manhattan Island. It has the highest point on the Atlantic coast, rising to 409 8/10 feet. The island is noted for its scenic beauty. It was Henry David Thoreau who said, when visiting Ralph Waldo Emerson on the island, God might have made a more beautiful island, but he didn't. There are many interesting landmarks of the early Dutch and Huguenot settlers. One of these is the Wurlitzer House. This building is unique because it was the first schoolhouse built in America. Wurlitzer means the teacher's house. Another and better-known building is the Billop House or Conference House. It was here that Lord Howe, on the 11th of September, 1776, held a peace conference with Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Edward Rutledge. This house was built by Captain Billop, who circumnavigated the island in less than 24 hours, making it under the ruling of the Duke of York, a part of New York State. Staten Island has 17 miles of sea beaches, 3 beautiful parks, 2 museums, and a zoo. There is also a ferry and bus terminal that surpasses any other in the United States.
Well, thank you, Diane. I think your classmates should really all be members of the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce. I know many of our listeners are going to visit Staten Island this year. Now to our questions. The first one is for the boys. Now, really, New Yorkers are fortunate because they have some of the greatest museums in the world right on their doorstep. Now, here is a record of a song that will remind you of one of our most celebrated museums. See if you can tell us of which museum it reminds you.
Would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, and be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a mule? A mule is an animal with long, funny ears, kicks up at anything he hears.
His back is brawny, but his brain is weak. He's just plain stupid with a stubborn streak.
And by the way, if you hate to go to school, you may grow up to be...
Well, I see most everyone knows. Edward?
the Museum of Natural History.
Well, now, that's a good guess. Yes, it could be that, only, of course, they're stuffed. The animals are stuffed in the Museum of Natural History. Now, what other place does it remind you of? Barry?
The Hayden Planetarium?
Good, yes. As a matter of fact, the Hayden Planetarium is said to be the second most popular place of interest in New York City. Do you happen to know the first? The most popular? Well, they say it's the Bronx Zoo. So there again, we have live animals, I guess he was talking about live animals, don't you think? All right, now, what is the Hayden Planetarium? What girl can tell us? Marcia?
Well, it has stars, and it tells you all about stars and the sky and the moon.
All right. Now, what other kind of museums can we visit in New York City? Stephen?
The Museum of Natural History and the Museum of Art.
All right. Would you like to add to that, Lawrence?
The Museum City of New York, the Museum of American Indians.
Good. Any others? Who'd like to add to that? Diane?
There are social history museums, art museums, science museums.
In other words, practically anything you want to learn, you can go to visit a museum to find out more about it. Now, by the way, do you know what museum was the first to be opened in New York City? Diane?
The American Museum?
Yes. Now, can you tell us some more about it? Can we go to see the American Museum today? Lawrence?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
Because it's closed and it had been turned into the Barnum and Bailey Circus.
Yes, today it's the greatest show on earth. By the way, who organized that American Museum? Diane?
P.T. Barnum.
No, he made it the greatest show on earth, but who organized the American Museum as a museum? Barry?
The Tammany Society?
Yes, that's right. Now, why do you think we should have museums? Marcia?
Because they tell us things that we want to know, and they explain things about animals and about people from faraway countries.
Yes. Now, Carolyn, would you like to add to that?
Well, they explain the history and things like that.
Yes. Lawrence?
Well, they tell us about the people of olden times and the cavemen and dinosaurs and their houses and their occupations.
Well, now, you've just answered the next question, which was, in what ways do these museums help us to understand how people lived here long ago? All right, now, a little boy last week said that the old houses of New York led him to believe that early New Yorkers led a cruel and unhappy life. Now, do the museums make you think that the people in old days led a cruel and unhappy life? What do you think, Lawrence?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. What do you think,
About the cavemen and
all right.
the way they used to handle their other friends cruelly.
All right.
And the Indians and how they used to attack wagons and shoot the white men and...
All right. Well, how about it, Marcia? What do you think?
Well, they did lead a cruel life when they came here because they had no food.
All right. Now, how do museums help us to understand people who live in other parts of the world? Carolyn?
Well, they compare things like our clothes with their clothes and houses and a lot of things like that.
All right. Now, I see Edward has an answer.
They show us their customs and dances.
Yes. Barry?
They show us their climate.
Lawrence?
Their religion and their books.
Yes. Diane?
Their comparison with their occupations.
Good. Stephen?
Their costumes.
Yes. Edward?
Their wildlife.
That's true. Now, if your class was studying the American Indian, to what museum would you go to learn more about the Indians? Marcia?
To the Museum of Natural History.
All right. Carolyn?
The Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yes. Lawrence?
To the Museum of American Indians.
Good. All right. Now, of all the exhibits that you have seen, which ones did you like the best? Barry?
The Titanium exhibit in the Museum of Natural History because it shows the uses of titanium in our life today.
Good. Carolyn?
Well, the thing I liked best was the stuffed animal exhibit.
All right. Marcia?
I like the exhibit about Indians and their teepees in the Museum of Natural History.
All right. Thank you. Now, what are some of the things you don't like about museums, and how would you like to change them if you could? Diane?
On Staten Island, there's a few, and we'd like to have some more there. and thus we could understand more about museums, and because we don't have many times to visit them.
All right, that's a good point. And thank you very much, Diane, and the rest of the boys and girls. As you know, our town crier's bell has just told us that that is all we have time for today. Now, before we give you the scores, I want to introduce Nan Rothenberg of PS9 Brooklyn, who will tell us what the children in her class have been doing with Know Your City. And here she is, Nan Rothenberg.
And Edith, your nieces and nephews of Class 4-3 of PS9 Brooklyn have been working very hard sending in questions for Know Your City in order to win a boat trip around Manhattan Island. As arranged by Brooklyn Borough Historian James A. Kelly, and by taking trips to places of interest with our parents, friends, and teachers, in order to win for our representatives a luncheon on board the SS America, as well as a copy of Sail On for our class, and a beautiful picture of the SS America for our school, as arranged by your favorite commissioner, Charles S. Hand. These trips have taken us to many places. Some of us have taken a cruise to Bermuda and Nassau, on a subway ride to Queens, a bus trip to New Jersey, and on a buggy ride through Central Park. This last trip made us think of the earlier days when people sat in a horse-drawn carriage with baskets on their laps to keep them warm as they rode through the streets of old New York. A trip to the American Museum of Natural History on the same day brought us back to the days of cavemen and dinosaurs. Our class trip to the Brooklyn Museum landed us in Eskimo Land, where they learned about the food, clothing, and shelter and transportation of the Eskimos. A trip to the Botanical Garden taught us about different kinds of trees. Some of us took a trip to the Hayden Planetarium on New Year's Eve to see the Christmas star. We went by automobile. On the way, we saw the tall office buildings, freight yards, and quite a few ships at their piers. The two huge smokestacks were all that we could see of the SS America. We hope that more of us will get to see our club's beautiful ship.
Thank you, Nan. I'm very happy to tell you that your teacher, a child, and a parent from your class will have lunch on the SS America. And now let us sail on to Paul, who will tell us the scores and also how you two can take part in Know Your City.
Thank you very much, Aunt Edith. And it looks like the boys and girls here are certainly not out at sea about questions on museums in New York, because the boys got 23 points and the girls got 24. Okay, boys and girls, why not send in your questions to stump our guests? This week, we'd like questions on New York's libraries and schools. Now, be sure to send them to us no later than Friday, March 9th. Just address all your questions to Know Your City, Board of Education Studios, 29 Fort Greene Place, Brooklyn 1, New York. And, of course, be sure to include your name, grade, and school. Know Your City is presented by the Board of Education and the City History Club, represented by Edith McGinnis. It is produced by Van Rensselaer Brocon. This has been a Board of Education production. This is the Municipal Broadcasting System.
Know your city. Know your city.